Well, thank you all for joining us today. I think we're going to have a few more folks coming in as we start. But my name is Kelly Gasly. I'm the managing attorney here at Philadelphia VIP. And our mission here at VIP is to work with volunteer attorneys like Zane here today to get legal service. We help individuals who have civil legal issues, but we also do a lot of work with nonprofits and small businesses, which is what brings us here today. So we regularly find volunteer attorneys who can work with small business owners like yourself to help with a variety of transactional legal issues. So some of the things you're going to hear about from Zane today might be things that you might want to get a volunteer attorney involved with at some point in the future. If you start up a home healthcare business or already have one and know that you've got some legal needs. So, things like anything from incorporating your business to figuring out what kind of entity do you want to be? Do you want to be an LLC? Do you want to be a sole proprietor? To issues with contracts that you need reviewed or drawn up, to commercial lease issues, which are probably a little less of a legal issue for those of you doing home healthcare work. But just so you know, we do commercial lease issues and variety of other transactional legal issues that come up when you as a small business owner are trying to move forward with your small business. So we are really excited to be partnering today with Zane, who this is now, I think, our second workshop together, to try to get more kind of in-depth information on legal issues that we know are really at the forefront of a lot of folks' minds. And this topic for home healthcare is definitely one we hear about from clients. So we're really excited to be partnering with Zane again to try to get some of his expertise directly to you all. And so from here, I'm going to turn it over to Zane, but just want to thank Zane so much for initiating and organizing all of this and for helping to get this information out there to everyone, kind of navigating through a home healthcare business, which can be, I know, quite a bit. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kelly, for the introduction and for the willingness to partner and work together and collaborate to provide me with information on kind of what folks are looking for information on, and being willing to allow me to volunteer my time to put something together to kind of share some information with folks. So hello everyone, welcome, good afternoon on this beautiful Wednesday. Hope everyone's week is going well. Today's workshop is obviously about starting a home healthcare business, and the goal today, and Kelly, you can move to the next, wait, no, sorry, not the next slide yet. That's an introduction slide, sorry. The goal today really is to help introduce you to, some of the requirements when it comes to starting a home healthcare business. And as Kelly, mentioned, I've done one previous presentation with Philly VIP before. And Philly VIP talks to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners who are looking for free legal assistance, and is able to help a lot of folks, but there's a lot more need out there than they're able to handle, than any of us is able to handle, really. And so through collaborations and partnerships like this, we're able to address some of those questions that folks have. And so this is going to kind of be a primer to kind of get you introduced to some of the things that you need to have on your mind when you're starting your home healthcare business, and kind of getting you to a place where you're ready to get started. And by all means, this is a process that where there are a lot of requirements, a lot of regulations, a lot of things that you have to navigate. So you're going to want to find someone who can help kind of navigate you through this process. And so, as I said, today is really intended to be a primer for you, and hopefully kind of get you in a path where you're ready to get started with kind of moving forward. So next slide. So just a little bit more about me before we get into the actual presentation. My name is Zane. I'm the founder of MZA Legal. We are a small Black-owned virtual law firm that focuses on helping new entrepreneurs set a solid foundation for the future growth of their business. So a lot of the things that Philly VIP does, I do as well. Obviously, I do it in the for-profit space, but I think that a lot of the work that we do is kind of all geared towards and intended to help really everyday people who are looking to get into entrepreneurship, who might be professionals in their industry, who are looking to go out on their own, or who might be looking to break into a new industry where they see some opportunity, really just helping you to be able to kind of figure out how you set that foundation that allows you to be prepared and protected against the risks of running a business, but also prepares you to be able to take advantage of new opportunities as they arise. And so I'm happy to, be able to present today. I actually live in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is a long story that I won't go all the way into. But again, my practice is based in PA. I'm licensed in PA and New Jersey, but my New Jersey license is not active. And one other thing about me, because I feel like in terms of understanding who I am as a person, one, I guess, factoid that's really helpful is that I always root for the underdog, which I thought was a natural thing until I got married, and my wife is from North Jersey. So she's a Yankees fan, and they win the World Series every 3 years or something like that. And so that was definitely a difference for me, kind of a culture shock, because I always root for the underdog. I'm not sure if it's a Philadelphia thing, like Rocky, the Eagles, I feel like we just love that underdog story. And for me, it's a big part of, I think, what I do and why I enjoy the work that I do. Because when you're not expected to win, when you're not expected to kind of overcome all of the different odds, and you do, that makes victory that much sweeter. And I kind of think of entrepreneurship in the same sort of way. We live in a world where technology has kind of opened up the lanes for anyone to be able to open and start a business. And so for me, and I think for organizations like Philly VIP, we provide the services that we provide, so that you also have access to the legal knowledge and legal know-how to be able to help you set that business up and get going and kind of have your own underdog story. And so I'm happy to be here. And now that I've introduced myself, we'll jump into what we're really here for, which is talking about how to set up and get your home healthcare business running. So again, today's goal is really about helping you to understand kind of the basic legal requirements for getting started. There is a lot when it comes to running a home healthcare business. There is a lot of regulations, and rightfully so, right? You're working with a vulnerable population. You're talking about providing services that are related to healthcare. And so there are a lot of regulations, a lot of compliance issues that you have to be concerned about. And so just a quick disclaimer that today's workshop is all about providing helpful information. But as I alluded to at the beginning, this is going to be one of those areas where if you're completely unfamiliar with the industry or completely unfamiliar with how to set up a home healthcare business, you're going to want to link up with someone who's got some experience in that area and experience within the industry. And so this information is not going to be advice, but it should be helpful and relevant information to kind of get you going. So what is a home healthcare agency? And I think it's really important to be specific about our language and kind of what we're talking about to make sure everyone is on the same page. And so a home healthcare agency is an organization that is staffed and equipped to provide skilled nursing care and at least one other therapeutic service to individuals who are in their place of residence. All right. So that might be at their home in the community. That might be at their home in a assisted living facility, but it's providing those services. And these are services that are related to healthcare or medical care, right? So there's a therapeutic purpose to the services that are being provided. And the reason I mention this, the reason I want to make sure that we define this and understand exactly what we're talking about is because there is a similar sort of business model and similar sort of business that's referred to as a home care agency or a home care registry. So we can go to the next slide. And so again, it's important that we understand the difference between the two, so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about the regulations that apply, things that are necessary, and really just understanding your business model overall and what's required in terms of getting started up and running and managing that sort of business, right? And so again, a home healthcare business is really based around therapeutic services being provided to someone within their home. A home care agency or home care registry is similar, but there are a lot of major differences that kind of put those businesses in a different box. So a home care agency is going to be providing home services, personal services that are primarily related to activities of daily living. So helping folks with being able to, just maintain and stay in their home. So things like personal care, like bathing, personal care such as personal hygiene, preparing meals, helping to kind of keep the place in an orderly fashion, dressing, those sorts of things when it comes to, getting around the house. Those are the sorts of things that are specifically related to a home care agency. And a home health care agency might be providing similar or even the same services, but there's a different level of services that a home health care agency is providing as well, that make it a little bit different. And so again, the similarities here are that both provide services to someone within their home. On both occasions, the provider is required to obtain a license, or the organization, the company is required to obtain a license in order to provide these services. The licenses are different, but there still is a licensing requirement at the state level. And technically, both are considered healthcare facilities, which means that they're regulated by the Department of Health. Now, those regulations will differ. So there are fewer regulatory requirements for home care agencies and home care registries. Home care agencies are not required to necessarily have an employee who is providing any of those direct services, whereas a home health care agency is required to have employees who are providing at least those basic services, at least one of the services that they're providing to customers or patients. And we'll kind of get into what that means a little bit later. And then a home care agency is only providing non-medical or non-therapeutic services, right? So it's related to those activities of daily living and just helping folks to be able to kind of get around and manage within their living space. So just to kind of summarize, because I know if this is a new concept to folks, or if it's something that you're not familiar with, you may have registered for today's workshop without really knowing that there was kind of a difference between the two. I definitely hope that you'll, obviously stay and get all of the information if you were thinking of starting more of a home care based business. Definitely hope that you'll stay. Definitely hope that if that was your intention, or if that was your thought process, that you will reach out, and maybe it's something that we can, do a follow-up in a part 2 that's focused specifically on the regulatory requirements and compliance requirements for home care businesses. But while you're here, I do want to kind of just go through a quick summary of some of those regulations. And there's also a link on here where you can find some more information on home care facilities. But again, home care facilities are required to go through annual licensing at the state level. And they're also required to ensure the competency of their care workers. So there's a responsibility of making sure that the folks who are working with you are professionally competent, and whether that's a certain certification process that you make sure that they have to go through or complete, or whether you provide training, whatever that case may be, you need to make sure that they are, adequately trained to be able to provide the services. You are required to conduct criminal background checks and child abuse clearances, particularly where someone is going to be around children, and when it is someone within the agency who has a client or consumer facing role. There are TB, tuberculosis screening requirements, and then also appropriate record keeping procedures. And you're also required to provide information to consumers regarding your agency. So things like whether or not the folks who are working for you and providing the services directly to the consumers are employees or independent contractors, things about the consumer's rights in regards to the services that you're providing. providing. So all of these are requirements, and there are certainly some that are not on this list, but again, there's a link here where you can kind of get some more information on that. And if there are a significant number of folks who are specifically interested in starting a home care business rather than a home healthcare business, then definitely reach out and we can see about putting together, like I said, a part 2 to cover specifically home care regulations, because in the course of an hour, there's not even enough time for me to really go through and kind of pinpoint all of the specifics when it comes just to starting your home healthcare business. And so while initially I was hoping I'd be able to say a little bit more about home care agencies and how they're regulated, how to get started with one of those, I decided that in the interest of being able to cover as much ground as possible with the home healthcare businesses, that we would kind of focus most of our time on that. So in terms of who you can reach out to, you can reach out to Kelly, or I believe on the registration page on Philly VIP's website, there was a email address that you could reach out to, or you can reach out to me. My contact information is going to be at the end, but I'll drop it in the chat. Whoever, it doesn't matter if you get that information to us that's something that you'd like some more information on, then we'll put our heads together and put something together at a later date.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, let Zane take a breath and just say I will post a few different links in the chat to a couple places on our website where you can apply for legal help and some of the other resources we have on our website. So I'll put those in kind of as Zane is talking, so folks have those and can hold on to those.
Thanks, Kelly. So again, today is really going to be focused on talking about home healthcare agencies. And so when it comes to starting a home healthcare agency and kind of understanding what the regulations are, how to kind of start and keep that business legal, it's important to understand that there is regulation that can occur at all 3 levels. So that's going to be federal, that's going to be state, and that's going to be local. But primarily for home healthcare agencies, the focus from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, so making sure that you're keeping in line with all of the requirements for your business, most of that is going to occur at the state and federal level. All right, so your business is going to be licensed at the state level, and then there's going to be a certification process at the federal level to make sure that you are able to receive or be paid or reimbursed in Medicare funds, which in terms of understanding the business model for a home healthcare agency is going to be a really important aspect of your business, right? Because you want to be able to make sure that you can accept payment through Medicare, through Medicaid, and that your clients are going to be able to pay you that way, because that really just expands the audience that you're working with, right? And so before you get started, I want to make a point about making sure that you actually personally review the regulations and the applications yourself, so that you understand individually what you're committing to, and you're really able to evaluate whether or not this is the direction that you want to go in. It is definitely a huge investment in time, money, and energy to start a home healthcare agency. A lot of folks who get started will get started with starting a home care agency and then kind of work their way to providing some more of these other services as they kind of break their way in the industry, because there are fewer regulatory requirements when it comes to home care agencies, and it's something that they can kind of get started a little bit easier and with particularly a smaller investment monetarily. But make sure that regardless of how you get started, that you take the time to review those regulations and applications yourself. Don't leave it to someone else to handle it for you, or you might end up in a situation where you realize that person didn't take care of what they needed to, and now you're kind of scrambling to make sure that you get your business to a place that it needs to be from a compliance standpoint. All right, so put that responsibility on yourself to also read through the regulations and applications. But the next few slides will be hopefully a helpful introduction to what's in those regulations. And so I want to start in terms of understanding what's required for a home healthcare business. And this is going to be an overview but I want to start with business planning generally, because it's going to be so crucial to you as you get started, to make sure that you understand and have a solid business plan in place. Business planning is absolutely essential, whether you decide to do, the traditional 30-page business plan that you would use to walk into a bank and try to get a loan, or you decide to put together a slide deck, or you decide to put together a business model canvas. However you decide to go through that business planning process, make sure you take adequate time to kind of put that business plan in place and make sure you understand your business model, understand who your customers are and how you're going to be reaching and communicating with them, understanding who your key partners are going to be, and that's including employees, independent contractors, business partners, referral partners, whoever that may be, understanding how you set those relationships up in a way that's going to benefit you in the long run, because having that business plan in place is going to help you be able to address challenges moving forward, and kind of plan to address those challenges before they arise. But also, as I mentioned at the outset, being able to take advantage of opportunities as they come along, without having to kind of scramble to kind of get yourself in a position for those opportunities, right? And so one thing that I see a lot of times with new business owners, as they start their business off, they're going along their way. And inevitably, if they're doing a good job, if they're consistent in their work, a new opportunity will pop up, but they won't quite be prepared to take on that opportunity yet. And so you want to make sure that before you even go through the process of starting the application, that you've kind of put a business plan in place that's going to put you in position, to be able to successfully navigate that application process, and also be able to manage your business moving forward in a way that you're feeling comfortable and confident about what you're supposed to be doing moving forward. So understand who's on your team and what each person's role is. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the home health context. Know what systems and policies you need to have in place, whether it's hiring and firing, record keeping, health and safety, the use of technology. Have some SOPs, have some standard operating procedures in place, that are going to be are going to meet the requirements from a legal standpoint for your business, but that are also going to have you running in an efficient manner, are going to put you in a position to be successful long term. When it comes to governance of your business, which we'll talk a little bit about on some of the next slides, your operating agreement, your bylaws, make sure that those are in place and ready to go. Contracts, right? I talked about your business partners or contractors that you're working with. It's really important to understand, and a lot of people don't often think about contracts in this way. We typically tend to think about a contract as something that I would take into court. The judge would look over, if we have a dispute, the judge would look over it and make a decision about who's right or wrong. And that's one role that contract plays in business. But personally, I think that the biggest role that a contract plays in business is that it really sets the tone, or it creates a backbone for the future relationship as it grows and as it moves forward. And so it creates expectations for both parties about what their obligations are and what they can expect from the other person when it comes to their business relationship. And so for me, a contract is really about setting up a successful relationship moving forward. And so you want to make sure that you have contracts in place that you understand, in addition to being able to protect you in case there's a dispute. Because a lot of times when there is a written contract in place, the parties are able to look at the contract and make a decision about how things should be handled, without having to take it to court. And that's the position where you want to be in. You want to be building those strong relationships with your business partners, whether it's a real business partner in the truest sense of the word, or someone who you're collaborating with to kind of, meet a need within your business. Know how you're going to manage other key activities that aren't directly related to providing services. So marketing, sales, finances. Make sure you have a budget together before you kind of get started, so that you know how much upfront money this is going to cost. Do you have enough money to kind of get this off the ground? Will you need to get a loan? Will you need to ask friends and family for an investment? how are you going to finance this business venture? And then understand that there are services that you can provide within this industry that don't necessarily relate directly to providing services to patients or consumers, right? So there are people who need training. There are people who, if you have familiarity with the industry, there are people who are looking to start their business and could use a consultant, helping to put their business together. Whatever the case may be, understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. And if you're looking at all of this as we're going through it and saying, this is a lot, and kind of double thinking about, whether or not you want to start a home care business or start a home care agency. Are there other business models or other potential business opportunities where you could kind of slide in and provide some services and meet a gap that's out there? And definitely, as I mentioned, and this is probably the third time, but probably the last time I'll mention it, consider working with a consultant or some other professional who can kind of help you navigate this framework, because it will be helpful to you in terms of saving time, frustration, and energy, and just making sure that you get it right. So when it comes to some of the regulatory requirements, and I thought about putting this presentation together by starting with the state application and going through, what's required on the state application, what do you need to have, and then moving to the federal application for certification for Medicare, and going through doing the same thing. What is it that you're going to have to provide specifically, or what is it that you're going to have and provide specifically when it comes to the application process? I decided to do it a little bit different because the applications require a lot of the same information. And I also felt like, in terms of organizing the information and helping you kind of think about how you get started, that it might be most helpful to kind of just break it down into categories that maybe are a little bit more familiar to each of us, so that we can kind of think about what areas do we have to start thinking about kind of bringing together information, planning, strategizing, and also bringing together the right people moving forward to be able to get this business started, right? And so number one is thinking about our business structure, and what does that structure need to look like? And how do we want that structure to look, or what's going to be most advantageous to us from a business perspective, right? So when it comes to starting your home healthcare business, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific type of entity, right? So it could be an LLC, it could be a corporation. Technically, it could be a sole proprietorship, it could be a general partnership. There aren't any limitations from a regulatory standpoint. In terms of the law, there's no requirements in terms of how that business has to be set up and structured. But there are requirements about internally how things kind of function and how things work in terms of kind of the chain of command, who's making what decisions, so on and so forth. So the first thing I want to mention is that regardless of how you start your business and what sort of entity you choose, if you have business partners, which is likely going to be the case, because it's helpful to kind of form this sort of business with some sort of business partner, make sure that you and your business partner have an agreement in place. And whether that's a partnership agreement in the case of a partnership, or whether that is an operating agreement in the case of an LLC, or a shareholders agreement in the case of a corporation, make sure that you and your business partner are on the same page about just general business stuff, right? So, who is responsible for what in the business? How are profits going to be distributed? Is anyone getting a salary? Things such as if someone passes away, how do you want their share of the business to be handled? All those sorts of things need to be worked out within an operating partnership agreement or a shareholders agreement. So make sure you have those things in place. And then in terms of the typical management structure for the business, again, I talked about having an understanding of what the roles need to be within the business. And when you look at the application for both state licensure and both at the federal level certification for Medicare, there is a specific kind of structure that they look for and that they require that you have. On the state level, they use a specific term of having a governing body, an administrator, and a supervising physician or registered nurse, but there are similar kind of roles and functions at both levels. And the governing body is typically going to be your business owners or the officers within the business, kind of depending on how your business is set up. Typically with an LLC, that's going to be the business owners. With a corporation, and depending on whether or not you have investors who are playing a more passive role, or if they're active, whatever the case may be, someone has to take on legal authority and responsibility for the operation itself. And I didn't get a chance to kind of look through all of the case law and see if there's anything regarding kind of when it says full legal authority and responsibility for the operation, whether or not that means that you could be sued personally if you were the person acting as the governing body, or if you were part of the governing body, if the business is not compliant. But my guess is, just based on the language, that this means that if you are the person or part of the governing body that is responsible for making sure that the business is operating properly and legally, that you are personally responsible, and so that you could be personally sued. So it's important to understand that from a risk management standpoint. And it means that you should definitely put a focus on having the proper insurance in place to protect you in case something does go wrong, in case there is an error that you make, in case there is anything that you miss from a legal compliance standpoint. But the governing body could be a board of directors, it could be an individual person, it could be a group of people. But again, it is those people who are responsible for the overall operation of the organization. There's also the administrator, and the administrator must be a medical professional who organizes and directs the daily operations. So they're kind of overseeing things like, the policies in regards to how treatment plans are handled, or how you're accepting patients or clients or consumers, however you want to refer to them. They're making sure that on a daily basis, things are operating and being managed in the way that they're supposed to be, and so helping to keep the business compliant. And they're sort of acting as a liaison between the governing body, the folks who are responsible for overseeing the full operations of the business, and then the folks who are kind of on the ground providing the work and managing the people who are providing the services to your customers. And then you have your supervising physician or registered nurse, who is often the same person as the administrator, but these folks are supervising the folks who are providing the skilled nursing and other therapeutic services. So again, it sort of is a complementary position to the administrator, which is why in many cases they may be one and the same, or they may be the same person. But that person must be a physician or a registered nurse who has been in that position for at least a year, in terms of professionally being a professional registered nurse for at least a year, and can be the same person again as the administrator, because they play somewhat similar roles. So again, I mentioned the definition of what a home healthcare agency is. And so it's important to point out that a home healthcare agency has to provide skilled nursing services and at least one other therapeutic service. All right. And so that other therapeutic service might be physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech pathology, medical social services. It could be home health aides, whatever the case may be. But that is a requirement in terms of a home health agency. When you go to apply for that license, your business you have to specify what those services are that you're providing. A home healthcare agency can also provide other non-medical services. And I want to make sure to point that out because, again, as I mentioned, a lot of folks who are looking to kind of break into this industry may start with a home care business. And as they move forward, learn more information, get comfortable with what they're doing and understanding their clients' needs, they may move to actually starting a home healthcare agency after they kind of get their feet on solid ground. And so a home healthcare agency can provide other services that are non-medical, and there's a ton of them out there. But I do want to point out that if your home healthcare business is providing something other than kind of therapeutic services, it may be a good idea to kind of keep those services from an operational standpoint separate, at least from an operational standpoint, or maybe even having a separate, business entity that is kind of under an umbrella company to provide those other services that are non-therapeutic or non-medical. Because at the end of the day, your home healthcare agency is required to follow all of the regulations that apply to home healthcare agencies, specifically on the federal level when it comes to the Medicare certification. And so that can place obviously a larger burden on your business if those operations that aren't related to providing those medical services are also required to, kind of maintain those same sort of regulations that aren't necessarily intended to apply to those non-medical services. All right. So it's a good idea to kind of keep those separate, at least operationally, if not just having a separate business entity that kind of manages and oversees the operations of those services. And then, so when it comes to the folks who are actually providing the services, so the service providers who are working with your patients, working with consumers, it's important that you maintain proper supervision of these folks and that you maintain proper record keeping policies and procedures. All right. And so you want to make sure that those individuals who are providing those services to patients, consumers, that they are properly licensed, right? In terms of, if they are an RN, or if it's a physician, or if it's a physical therapist or a speech pathologist, whatever their lane is, making sure that they're properly licensed and that they're maintaining, keeping up with those licensing requirements, and that you keep that information on file and on record. At any time as a home healthcare agency, the Department of Health could come in and do an inspection, and so you want to make sure that you're keeping proper policies in place. I'll talk about policies in a second, but again, I talked about, and this is one thing that is going to be an important aspect in terms of your business plan, in terms of whether it's a home healthcare business or whether it's a home care business, understanding whether or not you intend for the folks who are providing services or the folks who are, ultimately helping you to do the work, whether or not you plan to have them be employees or independent contractors, because there are some limitations around who can do what. And when it comes to home healthcare agencies, at least one of the services that is being provided by your agency to consumers has to be provided by someone who is an employee, or by people who are employees of your business, right? So again, you have to provide skilled nursing and at least one other therapeutic service. So you could have the skilled nursing provided by employees and then contract out for home health aides, or contract out for medical social workers, or contract out for physical therapists. But at least one of those primary services has to be provided by folks who are actually employed by your business, which is again why I mentioned at the outset that you're going to have employees within this business. You can't have a home healthcare business that has some folks or that has everyone working as independent contractors. That's not a recipe for success. You also want to ensure, obviously, proper training or certifications where necessary. This is particularly going to apply in the case of home health aides, where they are not necessarily licensed in the sense of a registered nurse or another medical professional, but there are certification requirements under the licensing phase for the state, and then also on the federal level as well. So make sure that you have proper plans in place in order to make sure that they're properly trained, or that you're certifying that they have received the proper training before you're sending them out to do work. And then again, similar to what I mentioned with home care agencies, you're going to have to run criminal background checks and child clearances for anyone who is, working directly with consumers within your business. So, we've kind of danced around policies, and this is one of those areas where when it comes to applying for the license at the state level, and when it comes to applying for certification to be able to be a Medicare a provider of services that can be paid for through Medicare, it's absolutely critical that you understand and know all of the policies that are going to that you'll have to have in place to make sure that you're keeping your business legal, so to speak. And so these should be written policies. They should be written out. They should be maintained. You should be reviewing them annually, and you have to review them annually, actually, with professional personnel. So that's going to be at least one physician and at least one registered nurse. And those might be folks who are within your business, or you might hire outside experts if necessary to help you with that. But you're going to have to come up with policies that address administration. So things like how the company is organized and kind of what the chain of command, so to speak, is. So who's responsible for what services you're providing, and also proper policies in place for coordination of services, particularly if you have employees and independent contractors who are providing services. How do they kind of communicate? And again, this is in a therapeutic setting, so the customers or clients or consumers, they're going to have a treatment plan, right? And so the folks who are providing those services, there needs to be a policy and plan in place for how they're going to communicate and make sure everyone is on the same page. You need to have personnel policies in place in terms of job descriptions, qualifications that are required, licensing requirements, performance evaluations, background checks, all of that stuff, and make sure that you're keeping adequate records of that. Also, something that wouldn't naturally be thought of, but is a major requirement, is that you have appropriate policies in terms of non-discrimination and following all civil rights laws. So you're required to comply with the PA Human Relations Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1984, which is the federal law. And you have to maintain a written policy and provide signed and dated provide notifications to employees, get them signed and dated, keep those records. And you also have requirements around posting those policies around the workplace in a way that's accessible both to employees, both to your staff, and to folks from the general public who might come into your business. So it's definitely an important aspect. And if this is something where you feel like you need assistance with it, an employment attorney or an HR consultant would probably be a good place to turn for help with that. And then you also have to have policies around patient acceptance and record keeping. And these policies, again, like I said, they all should be reviewed by professional personnel annually, particularly when it comes to those that are related to, consumer services specifically. So then, we also touched on a little bit record keeping and how important that is. And so a couple of things that I want to point out about record keeping when it comes to home health care businesses. Again, this is a therapeutic setting that we're talking about in terms of the business. And so you're going to have clinical records that you need to make sure that you maintain, and they need to be maintained in a way that keeps up with professional standards, right? And so one of those is how long you have to keep the records. You have to keep those records for at least 7 years. And make sure that you provide a policy for retention of those records, even if your business goes out of business, right? So if your business is, if you decide to shut your business down, who's going to be responsible for keeping those records afterwards? And then also policies around making sure that those records are kept in a confidential manner, right? So if those records are kept physically at your primary place of business, where are they located? How are you ensuring that only certain people have access to them? Same thing with electronically, making sure that access is locked off except to the folks who need to have access or who are allowed to have access to those confidential files, that confidential patient information. You should also be aware of OASIS, which is the Outcome and Assessment Information Set. I'll be honest, I cannot give you a whole lot of information on OASIS in terms of how it works, because it's a very industry specific, sort of requirement around how patient assessments are done, and then what information needs to be collected and then reported back to the federal government when it comes to, and this is a federal requirement. And so, make sure again that if this isn't something that you're familiar with as well, that you have, you're obviously going to have the requirement of having an administrator who is a medical professional. Make sure that that person, or that you have bring in an outside consultant who really helps you to understand how you have to maintain and keep those records and report them at the end of the day, if you want to make sure that you keep your business compliant. So last but not least, that kind of covers kind of a general overview of the categories of information and things that you have to have in place when you're getting started and when you're getting ready to launch your home healthcare business. And so this will be the recording of this workshop will be shared afterwards. So it's something that you can kind of go back, run through, listen to again to kind of make sure that you're, kind of understanding what categories those things fall into as you're engaging in your business planning. But I want to make some specific notes on the actual applications. Number one being to take your time. All right. And this is not a process that is going to happen overnight in terms of setting your business up and getting your business licensed. But you want to start with the state application, because you're going to need your state license in order to get the federal certification for the Medicare. And again, you want to take your time, because your application can be rejected, or it will be rejected if it is incomplete, or if it contains any inaccurate information. So you don't want to take the whole time to fill out the application, figure out what you need, do the business planning, then rush through it, or just rush through it and get denied and then have to go back and do it again, right? You want to make sure they have everything in place, you know what you need. That's why, again, I started off with saying, read the regulations on your own, and also read through the applications on your own so that you understand what's going to be requested and required of you to get your business set up and off the ground. So take your time with it. Also, they put this on the website. I'm not sure exactly how true it is, but they say don't call about your application after it's submitted, because it can actually slow down the review time, because they take the time to respond to whatever questions you have about the application before moving forward with the actual review. So how long will it actually take? Well, when you submit the application, right now, they're saying it's taking 6 to 9 months. And that's something that I know is likely to vary kind of depending on just general circumstances, right? And so be prepared for it to potentially take longer than that, and be patient with it. And one other thing that I want to note that's very important is that the application is a part of the public record. And so within your business, you're going to have your standard operating procedures, your policies. You're going to have information that you might want to keep confidential, or that you might even consider to be a trade secret. And so it's very important, because the application is part of the public record. If any information like that is going to be included in your application, you need to make sure that you state that within the application, and there is a section and there's instructions on how you can do that. But you don't want to put your confidential information about your business or your trade secrets in that application and not take any steps to protect it, because you can lose protection over that very valuable information. All right. So make sure before you apply or before you submit that application that you take the time to identify what in that application is protected confidential information, either as a trade secret or any other sort of information that needs to be kept confidential in order for your business to be able to run effectively and have a competitive advantage. And so I've included a link at the bottom in terms of providing more on the state licensing procedures and where you can actually go to get the actual application for applying for the state license for your home healthcare business.
Zane, I had a quick question on
Sure.
that last point you made.
Mhm.
Can you give any examples of what might be confidential information or trade secret that you don't want to include in the application?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. So an example, the best example that I can think of that would kind of be the most common would be like a standard operating procedure, right? So if you've put together, if you have a certain procedure that you go through, let's say, assessing what a patient's need might be, and that process that you go through is proprietary, meaning it has some sort of commercial value, and you've gone through developing it on your own. And it gives you a competitive advantage over other businesses in a similar in your industry who don't have it. Like, let's say your standard operating procedure for patient assessment just helps you to pinpoint really well what they need in the line of physical therapy or what they need in the line of occupational therapy, whatever the case may be, whatever that advantage is. Because of the fact that it has a commercial value, it's confidential, so no one else has access to it. And because of the fact that it, like I said, it gives you that advantage. You want to make sure that you keep that confidential. You want to make sure that it's not something that you kind of just put out there that your competitors can get a hold of and then utilize it to, kind of follow the same process as you. So hopefully that kind of gives you a sense, but it could also include something like customer lists, or if you have particular business partners or vendors that you work with, that others might not have access to those specific contacts, and that's something that maybe you're required to put in a certain section of the application. Make sure any of those things that aren't part of the kind of public record that you've put the work in to assembling and putting together yourself, that you take the time to identify what those things are and keep them protected. So last but not least, just a couple notes on the Medicare certification application, which is, again, the application at the federal level. Again, take your time. This is something where you can be rejected for providing incomplete information. So you don't want to fill out the whole application, figure out you missed something, then get rejected or have to go through a whole nother process to try to correct that, just because you didn't quite take your time. So take your time. Before applying for your Medicare certification, as I mentioned, you'll need your state license. So you will start with that. But you're also going to need an NPI number. And so that is actually the website below that has more information on the federal certification. That website has a kind of step-by-step that also leads you through and tells you where you can get that NPI number. But you're going to need that NPI number before you apply for the Medicare certification. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I hope it was informative. I know that this, like I said, this is the first time that we're doing this. So any feedback that you can provide, and I'm going to talk with Kelly afterwards, and we'll put together, I'll put together a survey and send it out. But any feedback that you can provide would be greatly appreciated to kind of figure out what within this was helpful, what wasn't. Was the information provided in a way that made sense and that you felt like you were able to digest and kind of really figure out and pinpoint what you need? Or also, because I'm a lawyer, so I spend a lot of time looking at things that others don't look at and trying to understand things that we just don't think about on an everyday basis. So I'm sure that there are things that I went over or talked about that I wasn't talking about in just everyday average language. So if there's any feedback you have about, things that you like, things that you didn't like, definitely feel free to reach out, or again, please fill out the survey that I'll send out afterwards, or that we'll send out afterwards. But we have a few minutes left. So are there any questions? And I saw that there was one dropped in the chat.
There was, and actually, we talked about it a little bit over private chat, but
Okay.
I'll kind of provide some direction, some different, possibly slightly different direction than she posed, but a question about what other opportunities in related fields might there be if, after sitting through this, for whatever reason, it's not it's something that you don't want to venture into a home healthcare agency business yet, or you're interested in, overlapping fields. I mean, I think you touched on some of them, like physical therapy and occupational therapy, but anything like that that you might share that people might want to consider if the home health care business itself is not the direction they want to head.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, because my focus is on generally new entrepreneurs, helping them, set their business up, get a solid foundation. I don't have the type of industry knowledge about kind of the industry broadly, and in terms of everyone who kind of plugs in, and specifically where the gaps are, right? But the best way to think about it is thinking about, you have a home healthcare agency, and thinking about all of the different needs that home healthcare agency has to meet, all of the different requirements that home healthcare agency has to make sure that they're keeping up with, right? And then as you kind of review that, looking for opportunities where you can really slot in and kind of provide or meet some of the need that they have. If it's something that they want to outsource, or if it's something that, it's easier for them to hire someone to handle for them, right? So we talked about, for example, if you have a medical background, if you're a registered nurse, if you're a physician of some sort, you could be an administrator for someone's home healthcare business, right? You could run a business that handles strictly the administrator roles for these businesses, and be an outside sort of person who handles that administrator role. You provide everything that they need in kind of a neat, packaged up solution. And you say, here's what we'll need. I'll kind of guide you directly through this. It could be providing that consulting service on looking through their policies on an annual basis. So reviewing those policies and making sure that they are where they need to be, or if there are any deficiencies, that they're being met. But even outside of the medical aspect of it, right? Let's say if you decide, okay, I don't want to start the home healthcare business, but I am still interested in starting a home care business. Well, the home healthcare business maybe employs home health aides, or maybe they provide other services where, again, that home healthcare business is allowed to contract out some of those services, right? And so maybe there are, as you start your home healthcare business, you are, providing those home healthcare services directly to consumers through your, agency or as a registry, but you might also provide those services directly to home health aid agencies. Right. And so they might be contracting out, and they might want to contract with you to meet some of the need that they have in providing some of those personal care services that they also are trying to meet. And so a lot of it, kind of figuring out where the opportunities exist is kind of being in the industry, but particularly when it comes to networking, talking with folks, understanding who's out there, understanding what roles are being played and who does what. And kind of figuring out, where you can position yourself in a place to where you can use your skills and your strong points to meet some of the needs that folks have. So I really think the possibilities are endless. Unfortunately, I'm not sure about any specific resources that are out there. But there definitely are opportunities, because there are so many different things that a home healthcare agency needs to be aware of and needs to stay on top of. That the opportunities, like I said, are potentially endless in terms of the services and things that you can provide to provide value. So are there any other questions? So Rose asked, what are the processes if someone already has a home care business and wants to add home health care to it? So really, that's the point at which you're going to be going through and applying for the home health care license at the state level. And then again, applying for the Medicare certification at the federal level. So everything that we kind of went through, it wasn't a specific run through of what those applications look like, because the applications themselves, if you take a look at them, are relatively self-explanatory. And that's part of the reason why I chose to kind of structured in terms of just providing categories of information and things that you should have thought out and kind of planned for before you're applying. Because once you get to that application point, it's really just about providing the documentation and filling things out, with and being able to answer the questions in a way that is compliant and meets the needs and requirements that they have. So it's really just applying at the state and federal level, and then maintaining adequate compliance moving forward. And in terms of having your business structured in the right way, you're going to need to make sure that you have the medical professionals who can play that role as the administrator, and also as a supervising physician or supervising registered nurse within your business to kind of make sure that the treatment that you're providing, because again, this is a therapeutic service that you're providing. And so that's one of the big differences there with running the home care business versus the home health aid business, is that you're really going to be working a lot with medical professionals to kind of help you manage that. And that's why, again, and I said it the third time will be the last time, but I'll mention it one more time. Working with a consultant, someone who has the experience within the industry is probably going to be something that's helpful if you're not familiar with the medical the industry in terms of providing medical assistance and medical therapeutic related services. And thank you, Nicole. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. So are there any other questions? We're past one, but I guess I'll leave it at that since we are past one. If there are any other questions, feel free to reach out to myself. Feel free to reach out to Kelly or VIP generally. And again, definitely provide your feedback, because I would love to, hear what everyone thought. Again, this is the first time we're putting something like this together. So if you have thoughts on more information, things that you'd like to know, maybe we could do a part 2, but definitely let us know what you thought. But for now, enjoy the rest of your afternoon and hope you all have a great week.